Hello and welcome to this Cannabis in Europe and in the US webinar. My name is Natalie Bougini. I'm a corporate and transactional attorney with the law firm of Harris Bricken. For over a decade, our firm has been helping businesses navigate rapidly evolving cannabis regulations and policies. And thanks to a growing number of US state legalizing the medical and or recreational use of marijuana, but also due to the federal legalization of hemp, the US market for cannabis has exploded in recent years. But this growth and interest in cannabis is not strictly contained within the US border. Europe has also experienced a huge uptick in the production and sale of these products. So in light of this global expansion and the growing interest from US and European companies to enter those respective foreign markets, I am joined today by two leading authorities on the regulatory framework of cannabis in Europe. Kay Friedrich Nierman from KFN Plus, a German-based law firm, and Daniel Heyman from Frorip, a law firm located in Switzerland. So in light of this, Kay is going to cover the European Industrial Hemp Association novel food joint application that he's actively involved with, but also discuss German cannabis laws. And Daniel's presentation will focus on Swiss laws and regulations, as well as import and export opportunities. And I, on the other hand, will provide a brief overview of the legal framework of hemp, including hemp-derived products in the US, and talk a little bit about current importation and exportation regulations. And then if the time allows it, I'll also quickly touch on marijuana laws. We'll make sure to dedicate roughly 15 minutes at the end of this webinar to answer your questions. So feel free to submit them throughout the presentation and we'll go over them lately. So now, without further ado, I'll turn over to Kay, who can give a quick introduction about himself and his firm and then dive into it.
Thank you, Natalie. So I started to work in the cannabis business, in the cannabis space in 2017. 2017 was a great year for Germany and cannabis in Germany, as Germany legalized medical cannabis in April 17. Before that, there were only 1,000 exceptions for cannabis patients. And there was a court ruling of the highest administrative court, which would have allowed a patient to grow his medical cannabis for himself. The German government didn't like that, so they introduced a whole bill on that in 17, and German patients can be reimbursed by their public health insurers. We started with 5,000 tons in 17, and now we are by an import quota of almost 20 tons for medical cannabis. So that was a great start in 17, and I started to visit the first conferences, and then I was at the ICBC in April 2018, and CBD came up. Nobody knows knew what CBD was, me neither. So I looked around and talked to the people, and everyone asked, is that legal at all? Can we sell that? Can we sell CBD flowers? And I started to write my first legal opinions on that. And it was invited to Toronto to the MJBIS conference in 2018. Got part of the International Cannabis Bar Association network, spoke in Washington at the Cannabis Law Institute, and by now we are only doing cannabis-related mandates with CBD, medical cannabis, and we are hoping to get to see legalization next year in Germany, as we have federal elections in September next year, and we expect some major changes in cannabis policy next year. Oh, shall I continue?
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, okay. Let's. I think medical cannabis is fine for right now. We will see The first domestic cultivation, the first harvest probably coming in next year. It's right now restricted to 2,600 tons plus increasing volumes which are possible. Tonight I want to concentrate on CBD because this is really a complicated issue in Europe. So let's start with the novel food issue. There is a European regulation called the Novel Food Regulation. So every food which is on the market has to be consumed before 1997 in a significant number. So if you can't prove that, if the food you want to distribute hasn't been consumed significantly before 1997, you need a special novel food authorization, which is granted by the EU Commission. You have to apply for that authorization and you have to prove evidence, you have to show evidence that the food you want to put on the market is safe. Till January 2019, there is a novel food catalog, and there was an entry for CBD which was like if the ratio of the cannabinoids are not higher than in the natural plant, than in the original plant, then it's not novel food. That was the situation till January 2019. Then in Spain, August 2018, the Spanish authorities withdraw all CBD products from the shelves and from the markets on the ground of the Novel Food Direction. Austria followed suit in December. There was a decision of the Ministry of Health to the local governments to enforce the Novel Food Directive. And then just 1 month later, in January, they changed the novel food catalog to hemp extracts. So all extracts of the hemp plant, of leaves, of the fruiting top, of the flowering top, were deemed as novel food. And by that, you are not allowed anymore to put any novel food, any hemp extract on the market. The German government followed suit also in March of the same year, of 2019, publishing on their website that there is no constellation thinkable with a product containing CBD that is marketable. Then the story goes on. We had a big retailer, DM. It's a drugstore chain with over 2,000 stores in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, I guess. And they had a CBD oil, a hemp extract, 5%, very popular on the shelves. And by official order, they had to withdraw it from the shelves in June 2019. And then the enforcement activities of the authorities in Germany were increasing till today. Just this week, I got 4 calls from shop owners, from internet distributors, receiving official orders to stop distributing their products. So you can argue that because the entry before January 19 was a prudent entry. If the CBD level is not higher than in the natural plant, that's fine. That has been on the market for centuries. We found, the IR found old cooking recipes on oil basis, lately on ethanol as well in the 19th century, and it was always a safe food. We don't know, or there are no stories about any health issues with hemp extracts or hemp food in the last centuries and decades. Never ever. So, but this was the political setting within the EU member states. There are some more conservative EU member states, and they pushed for this novel food enforcement. And now we are in the situation that we need to have a novel food authorization for hemp extracts. That was the reason why the IHA figured out a concept, a novel food joint application concept, in June 2019. The idea behind that is the IHA has 150 members, and everyone who is in the CBD-related product sector and is member of AYA has to become member of the consortium. So the minimum membership fee of AYA is 2,500 euro. The consortium fee is 15,000 euro in 3 installments over 3 years. This will be a sum of 3 to 3.5 million. And with this money, toxicological studies are financed with a service provider from Italy, directly located to EFSA. EFSA is the European Food Safety Authority, which is in charge of the toxicological studies and the granting of the authorization in the end. And these studies I will show, the intent is that these studies show that CBD is safe for the consumer in end products, in food end products, and especially THC is safe. We have very, very strict thresholds for THC in Europe. It's the ARFD figured out by EFSA as well. It's 1 microgram per kilogram body weight. So it's just 70 microgram THC per portion you take into. So you have to work with recommendation, daily recommendation, intake recommendations, and almost every product on the market has a problem with this THC thresholds. So this is the second very important issue of the AYA joint application of the tox studies. They want to go up to 7 microgram per kilogram body weight. So seven times as much as right now. So this is the only way out for the market. This will last at least 3 years. We're expecting the authorization at the beginning of 2024 or at the end of 2023. We will see. The project is on the way. The contracts arrived at the headquarters. There was a project, GmbH was established by the association, which is managing the rights, which is getting the rights from the EU Commission and granting consent to its members in marketing and distributing. And the clue is, if the scientific studies, the toxicological studies, proved that this product is safe, then all these projects, GmbH, will be granted a data protection period of 5 years. So if you're not member of AYA and not member of the consortium, you can't refer to this official novel food authorization, which will be published in the EU records, but only after 5 years have gone. Okay, so this is a very, very decisive marketing advantage for companies which are taking part in this AYA project, and I can only recommend companies to take part in these projects. And this project, this consortium is open for every company from the US, from Canada, from all over the world. Just talk to the office in Brussels, and the AYA office in Brussels, and you will receive all necessary information. That's for the CBD part. Maybe I stop for the moment. And
sure, so it's up to you. I'm sure we'll get many questions about this novel food application process. So if you think that it's best to wait until the end of the presentation, we can certainly do that. And I know that Daniel has a lot to talk about. So Daniel, why don't you go ahead?
Well, thank you very much, Natalie. In fact, maybe just preliminary, the way I got into this whole business was actually quite similar to what Kai just described. My background is more in business. I was a commodities trader for many years, working in Asia, and then at some stage at around the age of 38, I decided to take the bar exam and joined this firm here, Forib. And when I started, I realized that cannabis was going to be a big business. Being half Israeli, I also saw that in Israel, it's been already established for 20 years as a medicinal cannabis program. And then I joined the ICBC, which was a big conference by coincidence 2 months after I started here. And I was the only lawyer in the room, and that really rarely happens, as you all know. And this is where really my motivation kicked in to establish pretty much the first dedicated cannabis desk in a large law firm here in Zurich, and the law firm is called Frorip. And it's a full service law firm. I will not talk too long about what we do, but just quickly, we cover all the regulatory aspects of the cannabis business, of course, other industries as well, but in cannabis, it's cultivation, extraction, cosmetics, food, distribution, retail. We do pharmaceuticals, and in general, we're a corporate commercial firm, so we cover everything related to transactional work, contracts, acquisitions, financing, and a lot of my work has also been focused in these areas. So that's just a short introduction. And Switzerland is a little bit of an island within Europe because it has its own legal framework and it's not part of the European Union. And I think it's important to give the listeners a little bit of a flavor of what the regulatory framework looks like in Switzerland. And it starts with the definition of hemp. Hemp in Switzerland, what people refer to as the CBD market in the US, I think it's up to 0.3% THC content. Here it's up to 1% THC. And whatever is below 1% THC is actually not part of the Narcotics Act. And there's various products, it includes the whole range of products containing CBD. They come as buds, oils, isolate, liquids for e-cigarettes, for example, food supplements, tobacco substitutes. There's creams. There's a whole market that is growing around around cosmetics, for example. And also, depending on how you categorize these products and in which category they fall, they are treated very differently. And the law, the way the regulatory system is set up is that depending how you categorize the CBD product, a different framework applies. In foodstuffs, in cosmetics, utility articles, chemicals. Chemicals actually is a fallback. It's like a catch-all fallback for if no other intended use is stated. So for example, for CBD oils that are very popular in Europe, they cannot be marketed as food products, or at least it's very challenging and very limited, as Kai knows well. And in Switzerland, they're registered as chemicals, as raw materials. Now, with regard to the latest regulatory developments, there's two elements that I think are important to talk about here. First is the medicinal route. So I will not just focus on CBD, but also talk a little about medical cannabis, because it presents some commercial opportunities that I think could be interesting for investors and in general players in this industry from outside of Switzerland. So far, there was a medical cannabis program where you could get access as a patient only via special permit that would be given by the health ministry. So it would be quite a long winding process, and few doctors could prescribe it. Maybe all in, I would say it's around 3,000 to 4,000 patients in Switzerland today. And the problem today as well is that no requirement is there for the health insurances to cover these prescriptions. So the motivation is relatively low, and the program has, even though demand has really increased, the threshold to get access as a patient is very high because these products are prohibitively expensive. And then what's new now, there is going to be a change that passed through Parliament, is that the Narcotics Act will change and will allow simplified access. By the way, Niall, you keep my time tab, okay? and this will mean that every doctor in Switzerland will be able to prescribe medicinal cannabis, which is cannabis with a THC content higher than 1%. It's going to go by pharmacies. Today, as a actual therapeutic product, it's only Sativex that is admitted by the Swissmedic. And then there's also a possibility for export. So the simplified access does not only mean that it will be easier for patients to access the medicine, THC will be a product that Swiss producers will be able to export. I will talk about commercial opportunities a bit later, but first just give you a quick framework. And another regulatory thing that's happening in Switzerland, which is a bit unique and which is interesting, and a lot of people from outside of Switzerland are approaching me with questions, is that Switzerland has a special recreational program trial that is going to be launched as early as, I would say, mid-2021. That's at least our estimate. So this is really happening quite fast. The medicinal program, by the way, we expect it's going to take the good part of the next 1.5 years to be prepared. So you will see trials of recreational cannabis in Switzerland happening perhaps as early, I would say, as summer or maybe starting September, October next year. Today in Switzerland, there's around 220,000 regular consumers of marijuana, you would say. That's the official number. I'm actually quite sure that it's much higher. And that's also to not just statisticians, but talking to people in the industry. There's a consensus that that number is probably quite much higher. And there was a proposal to conduct cannabis trials for research purposes, mostly to review social and health consequences, for example, of regular consumption. Whether that really makes sense today, where so much data is available about cannabis, also from other jurisdictions, we can put it out there. But in any case, it's a step forward in the right direction, and the industry welcomes this progress, because it has passed the National Council, it's the lower house, and the Council of States, and they approved a change to the Narcotics Act to allow for such trials. Now, what's the plan exactly? Cities and municipalities will be able to conduct such trials in their own responsibility and upon receipt of a special permit by the Ministry of Health. And they will also require the okay from the Federal Commissioner for Questions on Drug Dependency. So there's certain hurdles to be taken, and there's also certain restrictions that will apply. For example, it can only be one or several municipalities with the clear scientific justification for that specific trial. And the trial can go on for a maximum of 5 years. There's a possibility to extend that by maybe 2 years. All of that hasn't been completely set in stone, but it seems like it's going that direction. And how many people can participate in such a trial? Around 5,000 people per trial. It's only citizens of the affected municipality that will be able to participate, and only people who are already regular consumers. That makes sense. The products themselves can have a THC content of up to 20%. There's been talk about introducing hash as well in the trial, cannabis oil, and edibles. Edibles, I really don't think that this will work because of novel food regulations that, by the way, also apply in Switzerland through a different route, but they're incorporated by reference into the law. And then obviously there's going to have to be very strict quality control. The production is going to have to be GACP. There's been a discussion back and forth about the fact that it has to be bio-labeled. What does that mean? There's a bio production ordinance in Switzerland, and essentially this entails that production will have to be outdoor and in greenhouses, and we do not expect any indoor production. The parliament said outdoor production, greenhouses, if possible, if it's possible to cover the demand. Every consumer will be able to consume around 10 grams per month. Neutral packaging, no advertisements, distribution probably through pharmacies, and no consumption in public places, strong monitoring. So these two elements, recreational and medicinal, are really on the regulatory front what has been hot topic over the last 2 months. And obviously also over the last 2 months, there's been the decision of the Cannavape case, the descheduling of cannabis from the single convention. And some people have approached me asking, is that relevant for Switzerland? So the Cannavape case, of course, it led to a standstill in the administration of pending novel food applications for CBD, also in Switzerland. Switzerland has its own Narcotics Act and is not really bound by the decision of the European Court of Justice. But however, it would have forced local authorities and parliament to reconsider the current classification of CBD, because really Switzerland tries to be in line with most of its regulatory framework, with the European Union being the biggest and most prominent trade partner. But gladly, there was no negative developments in this direction. And also, Switzerland is not really part of the EU single market. However, there's bilateral agreements for certain product categories. And as far as the UN rescheduling is concerned, Switzerland is a signatory to the single convention. And also for Switzerland, clearly, this was a very good development. And we'll clarify a few issues, like, for example, the application of, for example, in the cosmetics field, where I think it's going to have a pretty quick and clear impact. Well, yeah, maybe I can talk about, if you would like me to go on, I can go on and talk a little bit about the opportunities for business and trade.
I think that would be great, Daniel. We still have a little bit of time, and I think that would be of interest to the audience.
Okay, then maybe let me start with CBD as a commodity, really. And we've been approached regularly by companies who would like to import CBD into Switzerland. And we've been asked what the restrictions are to do that. And the reality is that because the CBD is not part of the Narcotics Act, the bar is relatively low, and it's possible. We see even imports of CBD from the US. However, so there's no restrictions for biomass or for what you call flower or buds. There's even no restrictions for seedlings. There's been a change in practice in Switzerland with regard to the free tradability and of seeds, and which seeds can be applied in agriculture. There's no restrictions anymore. Switzerland's not bound by the EU catalog for certain strains, and cutlings, by the way, as well. But now, just give you an example in practice what that means. While the hurdles are low, you cannot just come up and there's going to be some challenges in implementation or in operations. So you would have to probably get some advice on labeling requirements, for example, which are important. CBD oils, for example, require a special document by the notification authority for chemicals, because again, it's traded as a chemical in Switzerland, as a raw material. Obviously, you would have to have a material safety data sheet. The more traceability, the better. Also, if you can track and trace the whole production, it's going to facilitate imports. Sometimes you can even, to be on the safe side, put in a request for import authorization from the Federal Office of Public Health, the Ministry of Health. For example, you would require a confirmation by the Federal Office of Agriculture that no phytosanitary import requirements apply for the importation of flowers of cannabis. These are just a few examples of practical steps that you have to think about if you would like to import buds into Switzerland, which I believe some people simply forget. And also what you would require is a confirmation from Swiss customs authorities. Now, when exports are concerned, it's quite free. It's easier to export some of the products. Also there, you obviously have to abide by the rules and the regulations of the country of destination. And that's why really before you export, for example, buds to Belgium, make sure that you consult with Belgium Council to make sure that what you're doing is above legal line. And I was asked to also give some price ranges of CBD today in Switzerland. Indoor Indoor prices would be maybe 1,500 to 2,000 francs per kilogram. Outdoor is much, much lower, maybe I would say something around 900 francs per kilogram. I hope my clients don't kill me if I put in those numbers here, but I think that's the range at the moment. Isolate prices really dropped quite dramatically to around 1,500 to 2,000 francs per kilogram. Okay, so I'll go on. I'll talk a bit about THC because a lot of people are looking at the THC market they feel there could be a big opportunity from a business perspective as well. And I've mentioned the recreational trials. So we've been approached a few times with the question, can we sell THC into Switzerland for the trials? The answer that I would give is I don't see so much of an opportunity there for foreign companies coming out of Switzerland. I see a big opportunity for local producers because they are already in a pole position. They're already received a special permit by the Ministry of Health to produce THC for these trials. You have to have the contacts to local, you have to have access to local pharmacies and a very good working relationship, ideally with the Ministry of Health. I don't think that companies from outside of Switzerland will be allowed to provide and to deliver THC for these recreational trials. When it comes to medicinal cannabis, however, I see an opportunity both for imports and for exports. Imports, again, in practice, it doesn't happen yet because, as I mentioned, today the market is rather small with 3,000 patients. It really doesn't make sense to import for this limited demand. But you should potentially, if you're interested to enter the Swiss market, make sure that you could have a structure in Switzerland where you can apply for GDP certification. Make sure you're GMP compliant in terms of your production. And then when in 1.5 years, this program actually takes off and demand will increase, we expect a dramatic increase over some time, depending on how doctors will be incentivized to prescribe it. There's still a lot of questions open, but in any case, there for sure, I believe that companies from outside of Switzerland might have an opportunity. And exports, this is where I really see a huge opportunity for Swiss companies because you have, with the experience in Switzerland in terms of quality control, and also the branding value of Swiss made. I think it carries some value in the markets. I think that Switzerland and also the pharmaceutical background and big industry that we have here in pharmaceuticals, I think Switzerland is very well positioned to take a big market share for exporting THC. So that concludes basically my rundown of the current situation in Switzerland that I think is relevant for this webinar.
Thanks, Daniel. That was really informative. I'll take the little bit of time that's left to provide some background on the U.S. cannabis laws, and I'm going to focus on hemp, given that its production, unlike marijuana's, is legal under federal law and therefore can more feasibly be imported and exported. So nearly 2 years ago, Congress enacted the 2018 Farm Bill, which in part removed hemp from the definition of marijuana under the Federal Controlled Substances Act. Consequently, hemp and all derivatives are now treated as agricultural commodities with their production regulated by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, but also state regulators. A few months following the passage of the 2018 Farm Bill, the USDA actually issued guidelines in which the agency expressly allowed the importation of hemp seeds and plants in the US. And according to their webpage, that's information you can easily access, hemp seeds and plants that originate from foreign countries may be imported so long as certain requirements, of course, are satisfied. So For example, these seeds and plants must be accompanied by a phytosanitary certificate to verify the origin of the plant or the seeds, of course, and to confirm that no plant pests are detected. One important thing to note too is that importers of hemp plants must also apply for a permit to import plants and plant products. That's better known as a PPQ 587 permit. Now, these new guidelines, or not so new anymore because now they're about a year old, certainly align with the position that has been taken by some US courts that foreign hemp may be freely shipped to the US because hemp is no longer treated as a controlled substance under federal law. However, in practicality, these court decisions did not eliminate the risk that foreign hemp be seized at the border by the Customs Border Protection. And this is primarily due to the fact that hemp is really hard to differentiate from marijuana physically, because of course the plants look identical and smell identical, but also because of a lack of reliable testing protocols in the US that would allow to calculate precisely or measure the concentration of THC that's found in the plant, especially because at the moment, the testing tools that are available by US enforcement agencies can only assess whether THC is present. And one thing I didn't mention earlier when I talked about the legalization of hemp is that hemp is differentiated from marijuana strictly based on a THC concentration. So long as the plant does not contain more than 0.3% total THC, it's treated as an agricultural commodity. But of course, if it exceeds that threshold, then it's treated as a controlled substance. So really using a testing tool that only determines whether or not THC is present is useless for this purpose, because clearly hemp will show that there is THC when tested in this manner. Anyhow, so all of this really means that additional guidelines are going to have to be issued by the USDA to remove this risk of seizure. Now, when it comes to exporting hemp plants and seeds from the US, there aren't any hemp-specific guidelines at the moment. So I'm not as well versed with exportation, but I would imagine that general guidelines would likely apply. For instance, you would have to determine whether the plant or the seeds are admissible to the trading partner country. One of the things that can be done is to contact the phytosanitary issue management trade directors. So basically, there are individuals in the US that can put you in touch with those trading partner countries. And let's say if the commodity, in this case, that would be the hemp plant or seeds, is admissible in that particular foreign jurisdiction, then the trade director can play the liaison and provide those import requirements for the commodity in that foreign country. Now turning to the legality of hemp-derived products. Although, as I just mentioned, the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp and its derivatives, the federal law did not legalize finished hemp-derived products. Instead, the federal law expressly preserved the authority of the Food and Drug Administration to regulate these products. Now, the FDA regulates a wide range of products such as foods, dietary supplements, drugs, cosmetics, and also tobacco products. From the moment these derivatives and the hemp plant were legalized, the FDA took the position that the use of CBD in foods and the marketing of CBD as a dietary ingredient is unlawful because CBD has been approved already as an active drug ingredient used in the treatment of epilepsy. In legal jargon, it's known as the drug exclusion rule. But when it comes to other categories of products, for example, topicals, the FDA guidance only provides broad information, namely that any product that is sold in the US must be safe for human consumption and meet specific labeling requirements. So despite issuing this guidance, the FDA has yet to regulate these products. This means that for the time being, it's virtually impossible to lawfully sell and market any CBD product under federal law. And so this lack of federal regulations impacts the ability to safely import these products. Why? Well, the Customs and Border Protection Agency inspects any imported product into the US to ensure that these products can lawfully enter the US market. Now, that agency works closely with, in this case, the FDA in clearing all products that fall under the FDA's authority. So this means that the CBP defers to the FDA in inspecting and authorizing the entry of hemp CBD foods, dietary supplements, cosmetics, and tobacco products, as I just mentioned. So since the FDA has only expressed a clear position on the sale and marketing of CBD foods and dietary supplements, it remains unclear whether other categories of products may be lawfully imported. So to make this determination, really, companies that wish to import to the US hemp-derived products that contain CBD should submit what's known as a CBP ruling request. CBP ruling requests are essentially prospective and binding rulings from the CBP on how products should be treated upon importation. So for instance, these rulings requests touch on, of course, the legality of the product, but also on which appropriate tariff heading should be used. Seeking this CBP ruling request is highly recommended when dealing with new products for which the CBP has not yet ruled on, because importers to the US have a responsibility to use, quote, reasonable care to enter, classify, and value goods that are being imported to the US. So this, in turn, helps ensure that the CBP, of course, can properly assess that the duties, but also determine that all applicable legal requirements are met. Now, in the past 2 years, the CBP has ruled on the classification of various CBD and hemp-derived products. For example, they allow bulk CBD oil, hemp biomass, CBD in bulk powder form. That said, I think it's important to note that every CBP ruling stipulates that the products may still be subject to other agencies like the FDA and the DEA. So this means that even if the product may not be seized at the border because the CBP somehow doesn't take issue with that particular category of product, these products may still be subject to enforcement actions by these other agencies. So that's something that we always warn against to our clients. And of course, when it comes to the FDA, the agency has taken mainly issues with labeling and marketing methods, specifically companies that make outrageous medical claims about their products and, of course, CBD. So that's one way of mitigating those risks, of course, but I won't go into that right now. But let's say we assume that the CBP ruling provides that the hemp CBD product can be lawfully imported, then the company has to deal with other hurdles. Specifically, first determine where these products may be sold and marketed. Like I explained, the FDA has yet to regulate these products and has taken a position on the law, the legality of foods and dietary supplements. However, all 50 states have adopted their own sets of rules and regulations regarding these products. Some, for example, strictly aligned with the FDA's position and expressly prohibit the sale of these products. On the other hand, more friendly hemp states like Colorado, New York, and Oregon authorize their sale and marketing, provided, of course, that they meet specific requirements. And then we have a handful of other states that authorize the sale of certain categories of products, but prohibit others. Usually they, allow cosmetics, but prohibit foods and dietary supplements. But quite a few states now take no issue with foods and dietary supplements, but they will not allow the sale of smokable hemp products. Kentucky is an example. So, that's a big issue, and a firm like mine obviously helps company make that determination. But then that's only the beginning of what needs to be done, because once you narrow down where you can sell these products, you then need to ensure that you're in compliance with every specific manufacturing, testing, and labeling requirements that are imposed by each jurisdiction. And this task is particularly burdensome, especially when it comes to labeling and marketing requirements, because we don't have a uniform system. And I know that stakeholders and industry players are working on that, and that's something that they're pushing forward with the FDA. But until the FDA steps in and actually develops a legal pathway for these products, companies are going to have to deal with this level of uncertainty, because ultimately, again, there's no way of guaranteeing that you're in full compliance with each and every state. That said, there's certain standard labeling requirements that are mandated across jurisdictions, and that personally I make sure for my clients are found on their labels. But that's definitely something to keep in mind when you're trying to enter the US market. Now, when it comes to export, you would basically also need to determine whether a particular export is permissible. There is also a mechanism by which you can ask basically the relevant regulatory agency if, I think it's called a commodity classification ruling. You can also try to determine whether or not that's permissible. So I'm not going to go into that, because really exporting is not my field of expertise. But I think, like Daniel mentioned, in addition to figuring out whether or not you may export your commodity from the US, you need to consult with attorneys in the jurisdiction where you're trying to send those products to ensure that A, it's lawful, and B, see what kinds of permits or certificates or other requirements would apply to your products before you start moving those goods. I see that we only have about 13 minutes left of this webinar, so I think I should stop here with my section and start answering some questions. So let's see. The first question I think I saw was for Kay. I'm so sorry. There you are. I think somebody has a question about the novel food application, and despite the name, I think they're asking if that would also apply to CBD topicals.
A topical is the cosmetic, isn't it?
Yeah.
They use the word topicals, so I'm assuming. I mean, in the U.S. right now, most state laws would treat topicals as a cosmetic, but I don't know if there's a distinction in Europe. Please explain it. I think that would be interesting to know about.
Yeah, I don't know that word here. We are talking about the EU cosmetic regulation, and this EU cosmetic regulation had an Article 14, which directly referred to the Signal Convention, Annex 1. And there was cannabis and cannabis extracts listed. So it's the same problem with the Cannabis case, but that's solved now. As industrial hemp is no narcotic, as the European Court of Justice stated at the 19th of November. So you can use every ingredient, every hemp extract in cosmetics in Europe. Be it from the flowering part, from the fruiting, from the flowering top, from the fruiting top, or from the leaves. There is the Causing Register, which is the database, legally non-binding database of admissible cosmetic ingredients in the European Union. There's only one entry without a restriction right now. It's cannabis sativa leaf extract. But after the decision of the European Court of Justice from 19th of November, I have already asked for that the restrictions, the bans on all cosmetic hemp ingredients will be lifted. And then you have to separate that from food. Cosmetic is not food. The novel food is only applicable for food stuffs and supplements.
Great, thank you. All right, let's see. Oh, go ahead.
Very similar in Switzerland. There's a food and consumer goods regulation, like an ordinance, that also applies pretty much the same standard. I will spare you all these details, but it goes in the same direction.
Great, thank you. Let's see, the next question pertains to marketing and packaging. It's apparently somebody I spoke with a few weeks ago about packaging regulations in the US, and they're now asking if you think that the EU would be a worthwhile endeavor entering the market, and how will the regulatory agencies welcome this level of accuracy in manufacturing? Not sure, I'm assuming that they're asking whether or not the GMP's manufacturing practices would apply in Europe. I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but go ahead.
So right now we don't have an industry standard for CBD products right now, but different associations, IHA, UK, Netherlands, they are all working on these standards. Regardless, we have already a whole set of EU regulations in regard to pesticides, microbiology, heavy metals, etc. They are all applying to foodstuff, and you have to obey that. You have to be compliant with these regulations. So European food laws are the strictest in the world, I guess I've heard. And you have to have put a very safe food on the market right now also. So these standards about CBD products will mainly concern the promising or the health claims. All the claims together with the product, the CBD ratio, the daily recommendation for CBD, the THC content, etc. And yeah, that will be all put together in one industry standard formulated by the industry organizations in Europe.
Great. Let's see, I'm seeing quite a few questions about other types of cannabinoids. It's true, this webinar we have focused on CBD because that's probably the most famous cannabinoid right now in the market. That said, novel cannabinoids are entering the markets, including CBG. And so I don't know if that's, I can certainly answer for the US, but I'm interested to first hear from you two about the level of maybe regulation and interest for these other minor cannabinoids in Europe.
So if you look at the novel food catalog, you will see that all cannabinoids are covered by the notion of the extracts. They are explicitly listed like cannabidiol, cannabidiol, CBG. So it doesn't depend on if it's CBD or CBN or CBG. All cannabinoids are covered by the novel food definition for hemp extract. I looked up lately the Causing Register, the cosmetic ingredients register of the European Union, and I found CBG, cannabidiol, CBG without a restriction. So in the meantime, you can use CBG isolate as inky term without restriction in cosmetics. But that is due to the fact that the inky terms are coming from the US, from the Cosmetic Industry Association. And they are exchanging their inkies, and then the European Union is using the inkies from the US side. and probably that was they weren't even aware of what they're putting up. But we have that a close eye. The IHA, the industry, will have a close eye on these terms and make sure that every hemp extract can be used in cosmetics.
Right. Daniel, do you want to comment on this or?
Similar, so it's very poorly regulated. Any other cannabinoids, and apart from the novel food catalog and what Kai just described, there's no additional mentions of additional cannabinoids. And in a way, I'd like to keep it that way because it just makes life much more complicated.
Well, you know, interestingly enough, more and more states in the U.S. are in the process of adopting rules and regulations for these products. And New York, for instance, recently released pretty comprehensive rules, and they specifically address cannabinoids. They don't refer to CBD because I think they understand that the market is expanding and that they're going to have to regulate these other cannabinoids. So they went ahead and just started using that language, which I think is smart. But yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Let's try to squeeze in another question or two. Somebody is looking into importing bulk oil products to EU manufacturers. What is their best path? And I know that's a very broad question, but do your best.
Right now, there is no way of legally marketing these oils. This is the first answer. The second answer maybe would be make sure that it is 0.2, less than 0.2 from the origin of the plant at the moment of the harvest, which would be a prerequisite for Germany to process it legally.
Mm-hmm. In Switzerland, there is a possibility.
They are not marketable right now in the EU.
Yeah. I would like to differentiate this for Switzerland. There is a possibility to import bulk liquids with containing CBD, and they would be labeled a chemical, a raw material for the production of additional products, and for example, for the production of cosmetics, provided they comply with all the regulatory backdrop that comes with it, they could be used for producing, for example, cosmetics. Or oils that are sold as chemicals. And that can't be marketed is true, and at the same time, the market is full of CBD oil products, and they're marketed as chemicals, and they don't have any type of health claims on them, and some of them can go through as for example aroma oil or aroma therapy or whatever you want to call it. So there are some possibilities to bring these products to market today, and they're marketed very broadly. And the reality is, as I know a few people are in Switzerland in an asylum, a friend of mine runs an old people's asylum, and the CBD products are the products that are the big hit, and people are using them very, very regularly and intensively, and they have a very noticeable positive effect on all kinds of problems.
All right.
Any health claims here? Yeah.
Okay, let's try to answer one last question, and the one that I'm seeing maybe is pretty complex, but I'm just going to ask it. How will the merger of Tilray and Ephria impact other EU medical cannabis license holders? Do you think this will ultimately? Who do you think will ultimately dominate Germany, the biggest market?
Who will?
I would be lying if I said I knew what.
Who will win the market finally, or what? Well, what's the question? Didn't get it.
How will the merger of Tilray and Ephria impact other EU medical cannabis license holders?
Hard to tell. let's see that the first harvest is coming in, and then we can see about the impacts of any mergers and acquisitions in that field. We haven't seen the first harvest yet, and it's going to be postponed in late 2021. So I don't know.
I think in general, there's Kai, if I may add, there's a lot of money flowing into this cannabis space, and there's definitely going to be an advantage of scale for bigger players that consolidate and have experience in the market. It's going to become a commodity. Me as a commodity trader, I know what the dynamic is there. I think you're going to be able to capture more value on the downstream space with branding and distribution. But at the same time, I also feel cannabis is not entirely just a commodity. There's also a certain emotional attachment to where it is produced and how it is produced. And I think that local producers could still, that have a certain standard biological grow and so on, could take advantage and really capture some of the more localized markets.
All right. Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we are at the end of our webinar already, so we have to end here. But Kay and Daniel, thank you so much for partnering with Harrisbricken. You had very insightful comments, and we hope to do this again soon.